Thanks
Okay.
for that.
Yeah, as you were good.
Okay. Bradley Shulman, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm walking through draft 1.3 of an amendment to House Bill 758. Um, and the one change to the findings was and finding number 3. It's actually 20 out of 29 carcasses tested instead of 21 out of 29 carcasses tested for finding of exposure to rodenticides. So this bill previously prohibited the use of any rodenticides. And so this definition section, there's actually 2 places in Title VI that deals with rodenticides. So we're in this chapter here, and we have some definitions. Second generation anticoagulant rodenticide, which is already in the statute. First generation non-anticoagulant rodenticide, those are added. And that has been in the version of the bill that we've had so far. We've also added a definition of distribute. There's been some concern that distributes, that internet sales would not be prohibited under these bills. It's our opinion that internet sales are prohibited, and it might be an enforcement issue. But we, just to add for the sake of clarity, we added a definition saying that distribute means to offer for sale, sell, exchange, or barter through any means, including sales outlets, catalogs, the telephone, the internet, or any electronic means, just to remove any ambiguity. It is likely an enforcement issue. If individuals are purchasing these rodenticides on the internet and having them delivered, but that would be a violation. Because what we're doing is in this section here, unless the use or sale of rodenticides is otherwise prohibited, the Secretary shall register as a restricted use pesticide any first generation anticoagulant rodenticide, which we're adding. Second generation is already there. And then non-anticoagulant rodenticide we're adding in. This was also in the previous version of the bill, but this is the crux of this bill. Because this bill stops short of banning rodenticides, and it makes everything restricted use. So you have to be certified in order to use it. And you're only able to purchase it at a certified seller. And they, as we heard in testimony, the certified sellers have specific ways and means that they have to actually be able to advertise and show those things. So then the control of pesticides jumps a couple of chapters. So now we're in section 1101, and we're on page 5 of this bill. We're defining significant public health risks, environmentally sensitive areas, and second generation, first generation, and non-anticoagulant rodenticides in this piece. Because in this chapter, rodenticides are this chapter talks about prohibiting the uses of rodenticides. So this bill does prohibit the use of rodenticides in any environmentally sensitive area within 500 feet of any environmentally sensitive area, unless there exists a valid environmental emergency, agricultural emergency, or significant public health risk, or a determination by the Department of Fish and Wildlife that use of a rodenticide is required to control or eradicate an invasive rodent population, to protect threatened or endangered species, or threatened or endangered species habitat. There also has to be a finding that the pesticide would be effective in addressing an environmental emergency, agricultural emergency, a significant public health risk. Again, as a reminder, we're just talking within 500 feet of an environmentally sensitive area. No other less harmful pesticide or management practices would be effective in addressing the emergency. Any significant adverse effects to non-target wildlife are mitigated to the greatest extent practical. So that is the only ban would be within 500 feet of an environmentally sensitive area. So that is a change from the previous version of this bill. And then we go into rulemaking. And so this has changed a little bit from the previous version of the bill, but basically the Secretary of Agriculture, Food and Markets shall ensure that any use of any rodenticide shall not result in significant adverse effects to non-target wildlife or environmentally sensitive areas. These rules shall include limits on application of any rodenticide in proximity to waters of the state. These rules shall also plan for the Agency of Agriculture to provide educational materials to certified pest control applicators regarding rodenticide alternatives and practices for minimizing the use of rodenticides. And as I use in this subsection, significant adverse effect means direct or indirect activity that negatively affects the health and viability of wildlife population or that damages its wildlife habitat. As part of the rulemaking process, this bill would require stakeholder input. So she'll convene a stakeholder group to include at least one representative from Fish and Wildlife, one wildlife advocate, a veterinarian, a pediatrician, and one representative from the pesticide industry to provide the secretary input on the rule. The secretary shall identify the required practices for use of any rodenticide and shall adopt by rule that any person that is authorized to use any rodenticide comply with these required practices. And then the secretary shall adopt the rules on or before January 1st, 2027. And this act shall take effect on July 1st, 2026. And before I forget to mention, but this deadline for adopting the rules might be a little tight, given the effective date. So you might want to make the rulemaking a different effective date, as a suggestion. Now we're just looking at this, but that's the bill.
Representative Ryan.
Do we define rodenticides anywhere? My concern is just that what happens with, say, this infertility technology that's coming, or say a next generation rodenticide. Will those get caught up in these?
No. So these rodenticides are specifically defined in the statute, and they are on the screen here.
So if somebody were to develop a third generation or something that's not an anticoagulant that isn't listed here, then that would be not covered.
That's correct.
Representative Lipsky.
Yes, thank you. On this stakeholder group, before that, John, we had a very 30-minute worthy presentation at non-meeting as it recommend. But on this stakeholder group, because we still have not heard from the Vermont Department of Health, why wouldn't it be prudent to have someone from the Department of Health on a stakeholder group if that's...
Yeah, I checked with Patricia again yesterday, and they had indeed said they were not interested in testifying. But yes, let's add them in.
But there's so much terminology about public health here.
Yeah.
That I think it's a problem.
Representative Nelson.
Also, someone on there from the Vermont Department of Agriculture. Someone from Pesticide Division should be on that stakeholder group.
We can spell that out. Yep. So the plant industry, I think we just say AF, designee. Yep. Representative Bartholomew.
First of all, why would we have to do that since they're the one doing the rulemaking? They can put on whoever they want. But in terms of the stakeholder, one thing I think is really valuable is it says at least. So they can bring in whatever stakeholders they think would make sense in their rulemaking process.
So you're looking at page 7 here, stakeholder input.
Right, on line 7, shall convene a stakeholder group to include at least. So they can include others as they seem appropriate to help them with the rulemaking process.
Yeah, okay. And if the secretary here is the Secretary of Agriculture?
Yes.
Okay. So they're by default, they're represented.
Potentially, unless they don't want themselves represented for whatever reason.
It doesn't
But
include
they're writing the
themselves.
rules, they can't exclude themselves.
Well, that's
They can
it's
exclude
being
themselves as a stakeholder, but they can't exclude themselves
Right.
from the process.
right. No, that is correct. I'm being a little facetious in that, but they would be running the rulemaking. It is a policy choice to specify whether a representative from the agency should be on the stakeholder group or not. That is the policy choice.
So let's just go back to what the difference between this version, this draft is in front of us and the bill is introduced. And if there may have been, I'm not sure that we've seen anything in committee that was a different version. I think we saw it's introduced and then we're looking at this. Okay.
That's correct.
So just to highlight again, what's different here, you mentioned something in the findings, that's fine. But then the original bill is introduced, essentially banned the use of all, right? And this bill bans them in some cases.
Yeah, so yeah, and I can explain. So the original bill did two things. One, it made any use of rodenticide restricted use, right? And this bill does that same thing. And the original bill also banned the use of rodenticides unless there was an emergency, an environmental, agricultural, or public health emergency. And so you could apply for a permit to use a rodenticide in that instance. And if you were granted a permit to use a rodenticide, it had to be used as restricted use. And so this bill essentially keeps that piece where it makes everything restricted use. That is kept here. But only limits the ban to using a rodenticide in environmentally sensitive, within 500 feet of an environmentally sensitive area, unless, and then there's some exceptions there. So the ban is much more narrow than it was in the previous version.
Questions about the impact of this, just there's still 8 pages of legalese there, so I want to be sure that we're clear on what we're talking about before Representative Nelson.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the legalese. I'm worried about the impact and the impact to agriculture and not every farm has a licensed member of the farm that can use it. As it is now, just so everyone's clear, because this is a licensed EPA registered product, I'm pretty sure, has an EPA number.
Yeah, they all do. Yeah.
So Michelle can't call me up and say, Richard, I have a problem with rodents at my house and I can't stand the thought of putting out bait myself, but would you come down and put out rodenticides for me? I can't do that. Even though I'm like, and Jed can't do it for you. You can't legally do it.
But I could hire somebody, right?
You could hire somebody
Yeah,
that's licensed commercially.
Yeah.
But, John can't go down to your house and put bait out.
Yeah.
Today, because that's how it is.
how many farmers would be stuck without a licensed applicator if they had an infestation or something like that? Are most farmers certified applicators?
No, most farmers aren't certified applicators.
They're not.
No, they're not licensed. And I don't know if you have ever had a rat run up your arm when you're grabbing a tire to go throw on the bunk. I have. I'm not afraid of them, but I'm not warm and fuzzy with them. And farms, and I believe in California, farms are excluded from their ban using rodenticides. I believe farms agriculture can still use rodenticides. As far as the food hubs, I'm not concerned about it as much because they use licensed applicators.
Commercial.
Yeah. And, and then, and I'm, as a homeowner, I have had a rodent infestation that cost my insurance company a lot of money, and that's $1,000 for the deductible to rewire my wife's car. And there have been other people that have had that as well. And so I've worked a lot harder on our food exclusion. All bird seed is in metal tubs, sealed, and use snap traps. And I do have bait out. Nothing's hit the bait. So I just precaution. My bait's on the inside of the garage, not on the outside. I appreciate, and if I'm taking too much time, I'll stop. We can do this in discussion. Because-
Maybe
I'm more,
we will, and we'll move right to discussion when
Yeah.
Bradley leaves, so,
Okay.
but thank you. Other questions for Bradley about this, just, interpreting what does the language mean? I think, sounds like general idea. All right, then why don't we, we've got a couple extra minutes. Let's pull up what you've drafted for 739. Now, this is the Paraquat bill. And this was a short form bill. We did look at a draft a few weeks ago that was basically the Senate's version of this bill with a couple of modifications. The Senate has a long form bill that was introduced there. I haven't looked at this. I gave Bradley some input based on the conversations that we had in committee earlier in the week, and some other things that had come up over the course of the discussions that we've had. So this is for discussion purposes. We've got Bradley for 20 minutes so he can walk through what's here, and then we can continue the conversation after he has to go downstairs.
So this is draft 2.1. And I didn't change the date here, but it was submitted that this yesterday. Amendment to House Bill 739, the Paraquat bill. And I have, in the findings, I have kills highlighted because that was a topic of discussion in the committee before. And I think I don't have instruction on what language to use there. So I just wanted to flag that. So for your conversation later.
Okay.
I
didn't.
And but the findings have not changed otherwise. So we're scrolling all the way down to section 2. So this is a ban of paraquat. And we added some additional reporting information and also put an exception to the ban. And so the definitions of paraquat haven't changed. No person shall use, sell, or apply paraquat except when authorized by Secretary of Agriculture under subsection C. And subsection C is when where the changes come in. So the Secretary may issue a written permit for the sale, use, or application of paraquat upon fruit-producing trees only on or before, and then the committee can choose a date of when they want to stop the Secretary from issuing permits. So essentially, this would phase in a ban of paraquat, but allow it to be used on fruit-producing trees up until a certain date. The Secretary shall ensure that any authorized certified applicator of paraquat has received all training required by the EPA and the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets not more than 1 year prior to receiving a permit for the authorized use. And then this adds some reporting requirements. The Secretary shall report annually on all data regarding any use of paraquat in the state. The report shall include the amount of paraquat used and location where it was used. The Secretary shall submit the report to the agriculture committees. I believe the Secretary only currently reports on commercial use of paraquat, and I believe the committee wanted to capture any use of paraquat, and so that's what this reporting requirement would do. And then it adds a study. So the Agriculture Innovation Board shall study and report on recommendations for alternatives to the use of paraquat for farmers. The report shall include pesticide alternatives to paraquat, recommendations for practices that reduce the use and exposure to paraquat, and methods and standards for transitioning farmers to practices that reduce paraquat usage. The report shall also include recommendations for alternative pesticides to paraquat and alternative farming practices to reduce the usage of paraquat in the event paraquat becomes unavailable due to regulatory or commercial action prior to date. And so this would be the same date as the ban above. But the idea would be to ask the Agriculture Innovation Board to prepare farmers for paraquat just to become unavailable more quickly than the ban in the statute might come into effect, or the ban for fruit trees would come into effect. The ban for everyone else would be effective upon the effective date in this bill. But for fruit trees, farmers would be able to use it if they get a permit from the Agency of Agriculture. Now, before January 15th, 2027, the Agriculture Innovation Board shall submit a report to the agriculture committees. And the effective date is the standard effective date, and that can change.
Okay, good. And that's
That's the end of the bill.
okay, great. Representative O'Brien.
Bradley, so is it just the user that has to get the permit from the secretary? So it would still potentially be for sale and that seller just has to wait until somebody comes in with a permit? Sure, they needed a permit too. When it says,
Yeah, anyone who is selling, using, or applying the paraquat would need a permit.
all those.
Yeah.
What page is that, Bradley?
This is page 4. So for any of these purposes, you would need a permit. The prohibition is on the sale, use, or application of paraquat unless authorized. And so this bill would ban the sale of paraquat in the state unless you get permission. And it would be for those purposes only.
And this, so says there on line 13, the secretary may issue a permit. So I'm just flagging, it says may rather than shall. So that's something we might want to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
Representative Nelson.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, check into that kills, because I'm not sure paraquat, it doesn't get into the root system. And I think they call it chemical mowing, I think. And is it prudent for you to reach out to Director Dwinell over there across the
We
road?
can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I agree. I don't think it kills.
Yeah,
I feel like that's the wrong word, but I'm not 100% confident.
yeah, and then we have nothing in here strictly banning its use as a desiccant.
So is that implied?
Yes.
It's implied, okay.
So it's banned, which would mean for anything.
Other
And
than,
they were making the orchard exception.
Yeah.
we're making the orchard and viticulture exception, all right? If that's implied, because I'm,
That-
and then down here, we say you have to get the training not more than 1 year prior to receiving a permit. I think Director Dwinell told us yesterday that you have to renew that permit every 3 years. Is it our intention to be stricter? You know, you have to take a course, online course, that's submitted, that's being done by Syngenta, and they're, as of common knowledge, well, uncommon knowledge, we believe that's the only people that are offering that course. And we don't know if they're gonna offer that course after December of this year, because they're pulling their license in the country.
What line are you on or what page there?
That is on page 4, line 17.
Okay. So, is this a one-time permit?
No, it's something you do have to renew it. You have to renew it to use paraquat, but I think we heard yesterday it was every 3 years.
So is the language that we've got here envisioning something beyond what we currently require?
Yeah, and I that's based off the instructions I received. But that is correct. Yesterday, the Agency of Agriculture said that paraquat training is once every 3 years. And so this would be more restrictive, but that is a policy choice.
And is this, the way that this is drafted, would somebody who is receiving the authorization need to get a permit annually?
They would need to get a permit No, that is correct. It doesn't specify the length of the permit. So it could be we could add a section that says that a permit is good for 6 months or 1 year once you receive it.
Well, yeah, so that's a policy choice. I was just looking for clarification and I see that there's two different things in the.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the certification, the training that's every 3 years, not the permit. Yeah, I can go along with it. You have to renew your permit every year
So,
to use it.
how often you need a permit is one question, and then I think your question originally was if the training's only available now, or if right
Certification.
now, if the certification is every 3 years, do we want to change that? Is it possible to change that? So that's maybe a separate question.
And one other thing to just point out that the only controlling factors for the secretary to determine whether or not to issue a permit is whether you're going to use it upon a fruit producing tree. And so there's no other kind of findings they have to make, anything of sort. So that would be the only restriction that the secretary would use to determine issuing a permit. And that's a policy choice. I just wanted to flag that there aren't those other criteria that you might see floating around in the other pesticide bills.
With requiring to get a special permit, that will give them a lot tighter control on who, what, where. And that's that's our intent.
I think. Michelle was
Yeah,
first,
two things, just, Richard mentioned about viticulture, and I think in what I see is only fruit producing trees. So if it is our intention to include the winemakers in the exception, then we might want to add that language, because I think those are the two that we heard about that were significant. Then the other thing I was just gonna say was, in terms of the mystery date that is highlighted in yellow, it might make sense to make that 3 years, because if the training is going away and people can get
Yeah, we
trained
don't
in the
know
next year, 3 years, would 3 years be a reasonable phase out anyway? And then they would have, their certification would run out at, when there's no more training anyway.
Okay. Yeah, so that's one possibility, certainly. Okay. I saw a couple other hands here. Representative Bartholomew.
I was gonna say the same thing, a vine is not a tree, so.
A vine is not a tree. And I don't remember whether we heard how, if any, how much paraquat is actually used in Vermont for that purpose. I think we saw that it's on the label or it's used somewhere, but we can maybe find out. John.
And along those same lines, where it says they should, on the report, it's the amount used in location. Can we potentially add, like, even though we know it's a pretty small subset of agriculture, can we find out what it was used on, certain things, like it was used on nursery trees or it was used on young grapes or whatever, just because like we're still unclear of
I think that's
this whole soybean thing. It's like, was it used? Was it not used?
Yeah.
As a destination?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yeah, so we can add that to the reporting.
The whole part of the special permit is so that the agency knows who, what, why. Do we need to put when?
When it was applied.
Yeah, so if you're gonna be getting a permit, if Deputy Director Huber wants to send his team in to observe and make sure all rules are being followed. Like under my license, because I'm a private applicator, not a commercial. I have to record what I use, where, when, write my dates down. And they try to get an inspector out every year. And I'll tell you that, dang Jessica, I need to put a iTag, Apple tag on her truck. So when I know when she's showing up, she scares the hell out of me. She shows up out of nowhere. And, but anyway, you know, and they do that, so they make sure you're wearing your PPE and you're doing things correctly. Should we put a when, you know?
Give her a heads up on when you're doing it.
Yeah, it's, you know, if you get a special permit for something, you know, a range of times, like I'm gonna be using it. You know, they gotta have weather, they gotta have the right weather, no wind, no rain. They gotta have the proper weather to use it, and that's all part of the label. But we should maybe wanna put a when, you know, in that date, you know,
As part of the permit.
what, where, when,
A window.
why.
And would it be, is the committee envisioning something like when someone receives a permit before they use it, they have to inform the agency, or when they're applying for the permit, they have to say when we're going to apply it?
Yeah, that might be hard, because, yeah, they're asking for that permit and. April.
So if we are interested, or if we feel it's important to have that information, then not when they apply for the permit, but when they're actually planning to, then is that, Richard, what you would envision, or?
Yeah, just so they have a heads up.
Okay.
Without being too restrictive on them, but they're gonna be watching, you know, if they wanna observe, they gotta know when.
If they want to.
Yeah,
And how much of an advance notice should an applicator or a user give the agency before, like the day before, a week before?
again, it's all weather dependent.
Yeah.
Could there be reporting requirements that come with the permit? So you get
Yeah.
the permit, but you have certain follow-up.
Yeah, perhaps that'd be a way to do it.
So as a permit condition, you need to inform the agency. I mean, I don't know what's reasonable, if it's weather dependent, if you said 24 hours in advance, is that overly?
Yeah. We could query the agency to, they
But-
think, because they do have special.
Put something in
permits.
there, if you want to just make a note, and then we can nail that down if we want to, you know, add that. Good thought. Representative Lipsky?
Just on that, when you invite, I don't wanna call them spectator, but they're gonna be inspecting. You know, they also should arrive with respirator, PPE.
Yeah.
And not, you know, it's just very serious for the applicator. Very serious for anybody close to that.
And I don't think I've heard anybody suggesting, but if this is the thought, can say so. I don't think I've heard anybody suggesting that we're going to be requiring somebody from the agency to show up. But that they would, if they knew ahead of time, they might. And presumably they would want to be properly attired.
And before we continue, because I see it on my screen, but it doesn't look like it's showing up there, but Representative Burt has his hand raised.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm in a very loud sugar house right now, but yeah, I just wanted to say that we're already required, I don't know if probably by rulemaking, I'm guessing, to record when, where, what was applied, what rate in our records. So I don't know if it's necessary to stipulate that in this bill because it's already required. I just wanted to point that out. And then I would probably check with the Agency of Ag or Steve Dwinell about how long the permit might want to be for. If it wants to align with the 3-year training, the 3-year permit that's allowed already with Paraquat by taking the necessary training. If we want to just make the permit 3 years as to align with that, or if we want to, you know, just stick with an annual permit. But I definitely, in terms of the permit, to me needs to last at least through the growing season. And when and where you apply it, you can't really say ahead of time because it's all based on weather. So that just wanted to mention those things.
Thank you, Greg. And I'm sorry we didn't see your hand earlier. If you want to just jump in again, if you have other thoughts
Yeah,
while we're screen sharing.
All right, appreciate it.
Representative Bartholomew.
Well, just in response to that, the users might be reporting their use where, when. But when we talked to the agency and specifically asked, they couldn't tell us anything more than what was sold in the state. They couldn't even tell us if stuff was coming from out of state, and they certainly didn't know where, when and where it was used.
That's the idea of the special permit.
Well, and that's also part of why we're saying here that they need to, report.
Yeah, I think if we're requiring the agency to report, then they'll have to turn around and get it. And we can let them figure out.
They clearly
how they're
did
gonna
not
do that.
know
Yeah.
when they were here.
Yeah.
I just wondered whether it's on the label or if it's agency, say, rules as far as application goes, but as in the agricultural and environmental community learns more about, say, volatilization of paraquat, can they update the rules? So like you couldn't spray, like at the horticultural farm, you couldn't spray it within certain population schools or, housing communities within a certain distance.
Yeah, so I don't know what we might say, but somehow direct the agency to stay on top of evolving research and as necessary.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a thing that can be done.
In terms of like updating their requirements for being certified, was that the,
Application, right?
yeah.
It might change.
I mean, they are already under law required to do that. So if the EPA changed, if the EPA all of a sudden issued a ban on the use of paraquat, the agency would be responsible for implementing that. So if there is something missing specifically that the committee wants, like in reporting or wants to have happen, you can certainly spell that out in statute here. I do need to go.
Okay.
So I'm going to sign off.
And just, this is my stock question to Ledge Council as they're leaving. What's the rest of your week look like?
I have some time this afternoon, and I think tomorrow I currently don't have, there's only a handful of appointments on my calendar tomorrow. I can't recall when, but
Okay, good.
I have some flexibility tomorrow. More so tomorrow. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And good luck downstairs.
Thank you.
So, as I said, we can continue this discussion on this draft. Happy to hear any other thoughts that people might have. We've got the rest of the day and tomorrow to come to any decisions. Representative Lipsky.
Well, Chairman, I really appreciate all the dialogue and input. And I appreciate Greg weighing in. Fairly comfortable with sit, and we only have 30 some hours left before we can take some action, something. I get a sense of certain consensus.
But
But
we should be talking hours, not days at this point.
yeah, that's what
Minutes.
it's.
Okay, thank you for that. Representative.
I also feel pretty comfortable with this. I think the one uncertainty that's left is what's the date that's showing up in the phase out exemption that we're providing for the farmers? Because that is not clear yet.
Okay, yeah. So other thoughts on that or on anything?
My thought is, do we need a date? Is if we restrict its use to special, really, permit, special permit to use it. And with the major, Syngenta is one of the big three. And them pulling their license, I'd imagine it won't be long before, I don't see it. I just think it's gonna go the way of the big time sheep farm in the state of Vermont. I just think it's gonna naturally happen, but
There's 6,500 lawsuits.
what's that?
There's 6,500 lawsuits
Yeah,
out there right now.
yeah, and those. When Syngenta goes and these other companies, they're not gonna wanna deal with that. And, I think it's just gonna phase itself out, but, again, I'm awful hesitant on yanking tools out of Greg's or Bill Shore's toolbox. Until they find a replacement. That's just where I am.
Representative Bartholomew and then Representative Burt.
Just in response to that, I hope that I can share your optimism that it's on its way out, but I'm all for helping it on its way out as quickly as possible. And I would propose that we don't allow it for use in Vermont beyond 3 more years. And if there's a problem, if there's no alternatives and it's a huge problem, then the future legislature can figure out how to extend that. But, let's just tell them, okay, the writing's in the wall. Don't plan on using it in Vermont forever. That's where I am with this.
Representative Burt.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say that I would just be mindful that it takes a long time to realize what works and what doesn't with an orchard. So if you change practices, say that we started studying next year what works better or an alternative to paraquat, it's going to take like 10 years to actually know whether or not it's a method that can work. Those, trunk cankers and different things like that, they don't show up that year necessarily. So when you switch up methods with orcharding, it literally takes 10 years to see whether or not it's something sustainable. So I think if we're going to do a phase out, we really need to consider that. And I think it's really important for sustainability of our orchards that we give a good buffer there. I would recommend something around 10 years myself. It might be worth asking Terry Bradshaw what he thinks. Thanks.
Other questions or comments, Representative O'Brien?
On that same thought about new science coming, about its dangers, not just to the applicator, but to surrounding communities. I don't really trust the EPA to be at the forefront of safety on that. So if there's anything we can do, right, it would be the link might be the agency and it's permitting. Like they would have to maybe, if we knew where it was going to be used, you would say like, okay, yeah, you're not going to get a permit on the hort farm, even if you wanted to use it because you're too close to the population. So I don't know if we can put something in there about that for the agency to keep up to date on all this new data coming out.
So would that be in the section on the permit?
So yeah,
we would direct the agency to consider. This goes back to your earlier comment.
yeah.
Evolving information.
Because when we first took up this and started learning about it, it was really just like you don't want to drink from a bottle of it. But now we're hearing that it does spread and it's so toxic that, right, if it gets in any of your mucous membranes, it can have.
Yeah, how many studies showed that though? I mean,
well, those sort of mega studies they were doing seemed pretty definitive that they were now tying Parkinson's to all these sort of hotspots for cars.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, I don't know if this affects our timeline, but I think our committee members all received a memo on apple crops alternatives. I think there are 10, I can't pronounce them all. It's from Michigan State University provided that's just for apples, but there's also for Christmas trees and viniculture. There are alternatives that have been undergoing testing. So, and I don't believe that's gonna stop. But I don't know how that affects the termination date. There are at least 10 that are scientifically currently being used as alternatives and are under tested by, legitimate major state universities and maybe many others. We've all gotten that.
Thank you, Representative Nelson.
Greg's saying 10 years, Rep. Bartholomew saying 5, 3. And it's true to your point, we could always go back and revisit it, future legislators could. Could we compromise somewhere in there and maybe go 5 years with a report back from the Agency of Agriculture about the viability or the importance of this herbicide to the orchard industry?
So we've got the agency doing what do we have them doing here?
Alternatives.
They're doing a study, right? And it's the Ag Innovation Board, which
Yeah.
is, would report to the agency, report to us on alternatives. And I think regardless of the timing, we could ask them to also include, how many of our orchard, what percentage of our orchard crop is actually using, this particular herbicide. I'm not sure that we got that information, and that feels like that would be part of the larger discussion. I think that even 3 years might seem like, if we're trying to have an impact a long time from now. We have done, as Representative Nelson knows acutely, in the case of neonics, we had in that case a 5-year implementation date. That was based on what another state was doing. So it wasn't arbitrary. It was tied to what New York State had already passed in its legislation. So here we're not, I don't think that anybody else has done something that we can point to and say, we'll match them. Yeah. Representative O'Brien.
And I appreciate what Greg said about the 10 years, but I also think if paraquat is pulled by the people who make it, in 2 years, the orchard industry is going to have to improvise and come up with new ways to solve their whole problem, whether it's other herbicides. I mean, it could just be, thrown at them that, no, you can't use this anymore.
Yeah.
You got to figure out something else. So they're pretty adaptable, I think.
Yeah, and none of us have a crystal ball, but it does feel like if that were to happen, we wouldn't want people to suddenly have no alternative. So having some urgency here, I think, might be helpful too in directing the agency to, we really want you to look at this, not just, add it to your list of reports that you have to submit to us in every January, but other thoughts? What's next? Well, I think we should take a short break. And then when we come back, I did say we would talk more about the other bill. We've got several bills that we've heard about today or yesterday that we have just might be helpful to have here where the committee is on them. Let's take a short break now